Welcome back to the Juiced Up Podcast. I'm going solo today. Maynard's actually on vacation, so shout out Maynard, getting a little free time for himself. But yeah, I apologize. We've been kind of inactive here for the past 2 weeks. So we filmed a good episode about 2 weeks ago, yeah. And we did it on the riverside, and it just the audio was terrible. And then since we were using the free version just to kind of check it out a little bit, unfortunately we only had so many hours of recording. So Maynard's like recording didn't even record the whole thing. So it was just an absolute gong show. And with my big thing with content, like if it's not quality, I'm not putting it out. So yeah, like I wasn't gonna go through the process of editing that, trying to makeshift it together. Like it just wasn't working. And then last week, I was out of town. I was in Louisville, Kentucky with the Glenbard West baseball team. It was our spring break trip. Played a couple games down there. So I hate the excuse of like being busy, but I mean it's been a crazy couple weeks here. So yeah, that's kind of been the theme with that. So but we're back into it. Like I'm committed to trying to get at least one episode out a week. Not at least, like one episode out a week. I feel like that's very doable, especially like when I have some things that are on my brain to just get on here and talk for 30, 40 minutes and hopefully provide some value to any listeners that are out there. So if you can't tell by now, I'm a little bit nasally. I apologize for that. It's funny. I've been filming like voiceovers and even like the commercial. I'm going to clip in here. Yeah, we're big stuff now. We got a commercial, but like I'm just so nasally, and it's just like the allergies and whatnot. But hey, we're grinding through it. Um, so yeah, I apologize if I sound a little stuffed up. But hey, with the Zoom recording, like it may even make the voice sound better. So who knows? So yeah, that's kind of been what's going on recently. Just like busy with spring break stuff. Baseball season's in full swing. Terrible weather this week, man. Like rainy pretty much all week, snowing tomorrow. Filming this on a Tuesday where it's pouring rain, and we're already at April 3rd or April 2nd, and there's going to be snowstorms on April 3rd. So we need some nice weather. The boys want to play. So in the meantime, just having guys get after in the weight room. That's been a big shift too, especially with a couple of the guys I'm working it with right now. It's like I almost took too much of like a soft approach where like we were trying to train too much like in season, quote unquote, like we were just doing ISOs. And I think those are good for like game day prep, but I mean it wasn't translating to the field. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. We're gonna switch it up here. We're just gonna start sending it, doing a lot more max effort work. I want to make sure we're getting our dynamic effort work in too. It's like for a lot of my guys, like a lot of them are going to play college next year. And while of course I want them to perform well this high school season, like understand that there's like more baseball to be played. And so I felt like I was almost doing like a disservice to them, like kind of pulling back on their training. So we're like go mode now, like we're all in. So that's been really good. One thing I want to talk about the main thing here, but one thing I want to talk about before I get into that is just like if there's any young coaches that listen to this podcast, I think this content can be a little bit of like stressful sometimes, at least for me. I've definitely been kind of in like a lull period, I guess to say, where like I've been almost trying to get so consumed with content, and I've been trying to like post every day on Instagram and put out like thought-provoking things. And man, it can get tough sometimes, dude. It can get tough like trying to share the right thing, getting worried about like views and likes, and like that's not why I do it, but like I think anyone that posts on social media can attest to the fact like that stuff still haunts you at the end, man. Like when you're putting like quality amount of time into creating a content reel or something or a swipe through or a podcast and it's like you get 600 views and 15 likes, man, like that hurts sometimes, dude. So I get it. Like there's definitely periods where like I feel super creative and super inspired to just post stuff and not really worried about those things. But then there's also been some periods like where I feel like right now where, and it's kind of going back up trending a little bit, but where I just kind of take a step back. And I had a really good conversation with Maynard actually off air. We do have conversations off air. He's a good friend of mine, but and he was just kind of reminding me too, like my job as a coach, as a strength and conditioning coach, even a baseball coach sometimes, a performance coach, like whatever my role is, like it's always to develop the athletes or develop the individual that I'm working with. And I think a lot of young coaches or even just regular coaches in general, like we almost get caught in like this influencer mode because social media is so popular these days. Social media is kind of like what rules our world, right? Like everyone's got Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And so it's like, yeah, of course you want to stand out and everything, but like it was just a really good refresher that like it's okay to be more invest, or it's not okay, like it should be the primary focus of like making sure your full investments in the athlete, right? Like if the YouTube post or the Instagram post like isn't coming to you that day, like no one's gonna remember that you didn't post on Monday and now you're posting on Wednesday, right? Like I think consistency is huge. Like I think being consistent and having some sort of a schedule that you're trying to adhere to is important, just for growth aspect and like getting your name out there. But for me, it was like a really big eye opener conversation with him where it's like, look, man, like I understand like what you're trying to do and get your name out there, but like your primary focus is training your athletes. And as stupid as that sounds, like it's really easy to get lost into that sometimes. So that was just like a big kind of eye opener for me. Kind of like this idea of shutting off sometimes. I used to not post on weekends, but now that I'm trying to get the blogs rolling, and like, look, like with the blogs, like I enjoy writing, so that's never been a problem. But because like for my quote unquote content schedule, like that usually falls on a Saturday where I'm kind of sharing snippets of it. Um, like then I get caught scrolling on social media on a Saturday or even on a Sunday, like for me, like I want to actually use Sunday as a Sabbath, like what that we're called to do, right? Like have a day of rest. And so I try to stay off all sorts of social media on Sunday. Sometimes I fail. Like sometimes I'll go on there if I'm, editing a post for Monday. Like I gotta go on Instagram, then I get caught swiping. But like for the most part, like I'm really trying to adhere to even on Saturday, like when I post that snippet, like post it and then like shut the phone off for the weekend, right? Like if I have a group on a Saturday, which most of the times I usually do, especially like in season, like just be fully invested in that group. Like don't worry about the content. Don't worry about filming something that day. Like just be invested into that group. So that's kind of something I'm been kind of going through and working through, and I think a lot of young coaches and especially, but all coaches can probably attest to that a little bit. That it can get exhausting sometimes. It can get exhausting, even like the trolls, right? Like, I mean, I love trolls. I think they're hilarious. I think guys that like take the time to like comment hate on people's posts. To me, it's just like, man, like, what are you doing, dude? Like, I'm out here like trying to provide some value, right? And like, if that doesn't resonate with you, like, just unfollow me. Like, so like, yeah, if they're gonna troll on my post, like, I'm never gonna go out of my way and start an argument with them because I know it's not that deep, but like, I do enjoy like kind of adding a little bit of like a snarky remark back here and there, but yeah, like, just be kind to people, man. Like, I think it's easy to see a post that you disagree with and then like pop off in the comments, but it's like, what is that really doing, right? Like, I think that was a big eye opener for me reading the Creative Act, and it was talking about like how everything that people do in a sense is kind of like their work of art, right? It's their canvas, right? So if someone's like having the courage to share that to the world, and that's like their perspective and that's their point of view, like more power to them, right? Like I'm not, even if I disagree with it, right? Like what does me going out of my way commenting some hate on their post do? And I've like, trust me, I've failed more than often on that, right? Like where I see something and it's like I'll comment some sort of like snarky comment and then like it actually pisses people off, right? And then I've been on the receiving end of that too. So it's like I'm really just trying to like share positivity. That's always what I'm trying to do. Even if like a troll does comment, man, like I'll troll a little bit back, but it's nothing ever serious. And at the end of the day, man, like social media is it's a game, dude. Like people are just on there to just share what they want to share, right? Like, and if people want to talk hate, like I know a lot of people are big into like the memes and stuff nowadays, but it's like I don't know, man. Like if you're just that thirsty, I guess, but lack of a better word for like likes and stuff, like make your memes. Like I like using like movie clips and stuff here and there just to add a little bit of character to it. But I just gone, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of people that are turning their social media into like just a hate page on people. It's like, what is that really doing? Like, is that really helping people? But everyone's got their own style, I guess. So who am I to judge? But that's kind of the introduction for this page or for this podcast here.
Before we get back to the show here, I would like to take a moment to familiarize listeners with some of my other forms of social media. I am most active on Instagram. This is where I dive deeper into training philosophies, as well as some other content relative to my work. You can find me on Instagram at Grant_Lala. If you enjoy my style of training, you can go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel where I post exercise demonstrations daily. Through the link tree in my Instagram bio, you can find direct links to the Juiced Up podcast. As a reminder, we post new episodes every Monday on both Spotify and YouTube. I also post weekly blogs on my website. This is my form of longer content in addition to the podcast where I go a little bit more in depth about certain topics. This is also where you can find the Work With Me/About Me tab. Give this a gander if you have any questions about training with me in-house. Last but not least, if you enjoy the shorter form content, you can also find me on TikTok at Grant_Lala. With that, let's return back to the juice.
I do have a cool point for today. And this was kind of a conversation that came up with a couple of athletes, one kind of on like, I guess more of a positive side and one more of on like something that this athlete could learn from side. And then I was like hesitant on sharing it. I'm not going to name drop any names, but like I think it could provide a little bit of value for I think anyone, like coaches, athletes, even just an individual that's listening, just about like being able to problem solve yourself, right? And I'll get into a little bit more in detail here, but my philosophy as a coach, and I feel like saying coach is weird just because I'm so young sometimes, and I still kind of view myself more as an athlete than a coach sometimes. So that's always been like a weird dynamic. But I think my philosophy as like a coach or a resource or someone that athletes look to for guidance is that it's guidance, right? Like I don't ever want athletes to be so reliant upon me where they go off to school or now that we're in season we may not be seeing each other as much where it's like I have to be constantly sending them a workout, constantly sending them like they had a bad game, like here's what you need to do. Like what is that really doing for the athlete, right? Like it may make you feel good as a coach because you're kind of giving them value and giving them insight. But like to me, those are situations where that athlete needs to mature. That athlete needs to kind of grow up a little bit and be like, look, like how can I learn from the situation? How can I physically myself learn from the situation? It's almost like that hovering parent, right? Like I think everyone knows that kid in high school or whatnot that their parents were super hovery or like they were super, I don't think that's a word, but they were super just like always like very controlling, right? And then they go off to college and they kind of get a taste of the real world and who knows, they might be flunking out and back home by a semester there. Like I think there's a time and a place to kind of give the answers to the individual and then there's a time and a place to like let that athlete or someone figure it out themselves, right? And I've been reading the How We Learn to Optimize Movement by Rob Gray. It's a sequel. I've talked a lot about him on these podcasts. I think he's a great read. Kind of been slacking on the reading. So I need to get really back into that. And I had a really good reading session today. And he was kind of talking about a similar thing. He called it affordance-based coaching. And the way he described affordance, like the definition is opportunities for action provided or offered to us by our environment. And a simple kind of just visual to give this to you, because that's probably makes zero sense. But he kind of explained it as you see a door, right? And on the door it says push, but then there's also a handle there. And like if you're like me, you're always pulling the handle, even though it says to push the door open, right? So it's like the push is that explicit instruction, right? And then the affordance from like your environment or your surroundings is that handle. And the way he kind of explained that in a coaching realm is that we have been trying to tell them, the athletes, how to play for the most part. And it's kind of ignoring those other kind of perspectives there, right? And I'm just going to kind of read a quick little snippet here from the book, and then I'll kind of expand upon that. But it said, so why is that example relevant to coaching? He said, well, I think it's time for a big shift in mindset of how we coach. For a long time, coaching has been about trying to directly manipulate and change the athlete. We have been doing this in two main ways. First, like the examples in figure 6-1, that's like that push-pull example. Coaching has involved sticking up push and walk here signs all over the place. Explicit instructions telling the athlete how we want them to act in their environment, For example, keep your knees bent, your elbow up, make sure to snap your wrist. We've been trying to tell them how to play while, for the most part, ignoring what the playground has been inviting them to do. And by playground, he kind of opens up this chapter by talking about how, like, when you're a little kid and it's like, instead of just swinging on the swings, maybe you're like, standing on the swings and then trying to jump off as far as you can with some momentum. So, like, not actually using the equipment, quote unquote, what it's designed for, but having a little bit of freedom, right? And so he then goes on to say that second, we spend a lot of time trying to directly change the abilities of our athletes. We have them hit baseballs off the tee or repeat the same golf swing over and over so that they can develop better technique. We have them run around cones or through ladders so that they can develop better agility, burn the speed ladders. We then have them do a bunch of squats to make them stronger. We have them following objects on a computer screen to give them better attentional focus and reaction time. The assumption is that they will just be able to pull these abilities and then use them in the right way and the right time when they get back into the game. And that to me was just like an absolute banger of a excerpt from this book because it's like I think a lot of like the new wave coaches, like the younger coaches like me, like we're almost onto that. Like I think we kind of take that approach more because I think a lot of the younger coaches, like they have that athletic background, right? Like for me, as an athlete, the coaches that I despised the most were the ones that were always telling me what to do. They never like let me have any freedom. They never let me have like just some character and like my own personality when I played the sport or even when I was training. Like it was almost like that their way or their high or the highway kind of mentality. And I think it's like you look at that, specific strength coach or not specific strength coach, but you look at that like ideal strength coach, it's like very egalitarian, very masculine, very like, macho, got to do it my way, got to lift heavy, got to do all these things. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that hits home with an athlete, right? Like we talk a lot about, how athletes have changed over the past few years. Man, like I've seen that even just with some of the high schoolers I work with, just like this entitlement factor, right? So it's like if we're then trying to tell them what to do, man, like it's just going to be a constant butting of heads. So I mean, it's not easy, right? Like it's not easy to, find that fine balance there because it's like you don't want it to be like complete chaos where you show up and you're not even coaching, right? Like that's not what that's saying. But it's also not saying like to hover over them and tell them everything to do. Like it's finding that balance where athletes can come into your gym, they can come into your practice, and it can almost be like that player led practice or like some leadership starts to kind of come to light a little bit and the coach isn't always there kind of guiding guys and telling them what to do, right? And so kind of relating this to an example that I had with an athlete, right? So one of my college guys texted me, absolutely shoving right now. I'm really excited for him. He's at a JUCO. But he texted me, he was like, hey, like I'm on the verge of like getting some really big offers. Been doing the workouts you've sent me. Like I think everything's going great. But I do, feel like I've struggled with my nutrition a little bit. Like, can you kind of give me some things for that? And for me, like with the nutrition side of things, I'm not like a nutritionist, so don't take anything I say like to heart. Like, go seek out more advice. But my thing with like the nutrition is like I don't think most athletes eat enough. And I think that most athletes think that they eat enough, but they really don't eat enough, right? So what I'll have them usually do is like I'll have them kind of track what they're eating, right? Track what they're eating just so they can visually see like, okay, this is going in my body here, this is going in my body there. Like, am I actually kind of progressing, right? And it also kind of goes back to that affordance-based coaching style, right? Like, sure, I could have just easily gave him a meal plan and said, follow this to a T. But like, what is that actually teaching him? Like, is that teaching him how to build healthy habits, how to actually meal prep, how to kind of, find that time to get his nutrition in, right? Like all those big qualities that kind of come with nutrition, right? So I just responded like, absolutely, man. Told him how I saw his stat lines, absolutely shoving. And then I said, like, do me a solid, go ahead and track everything you eat for the next like 3 to 5 days here, just to kind of get a baseline of where you're at. And then we can kind of go from there. So then it kind of puts the initiative on the athlete, right? Like if they're about this, then they're going to go track for 3 to 5 days. If they're not, then they're not about it. So then it's like, what am I like? Then it's a waste of my time where I'm spending an hour creating a meal plan for them. But then if they're not about it, then like, what are they doing, right? Um, So he did just that. He like followed up with me, checked in, sent me his meal plan. Honestly, like it was pretty good stuff. We made some minor switches, but like that is maturity. Like that's maturity of an athlete. That's a guy that knows what he wants. That's a guy that has a plan and he goes and executes it. Like that's a guy that's going to have success at whatever he does in life. Okay. Now take this with a grain of salt. That's a college guy. That's a guy that's, kind of gone through the ringers a little bit. Like he's got some more maturity under his belt. And then on this other end is a high school athlete, um, first year on varsity, pitcher, didn't play much last year. Still trying to kind of prove himself a little bit. And so first outing, absolutely shoved. And I was like, let's go. Like great year ahead of him. But like also, like when's that moment gonna come where he doesn't shove? Like how is he gonna respond? Because like I mean, you can't shove every time you're out. You can't go 3 for 3 every time you're out. Like you're gonna suck eventually. And so it's like, and then how do you respond when that happens? So he's down on spring break, has a bad outing. I think I don't know what his stat line was, but like it wasn't good. And so he texts me like kind of, down bad, which of course he's down bad, like not feeling well. And he's like, "Can you send me a workout for tomorrow?" And I had put together like an in-season training program for him because it gets busy. Maybe not, might not be able to make it into the in-house training where I'm at every session that we have. So that way it kind of gives him some stuff to do when he's not in there. And so I was like, yeah, like do one of the ones I sent you. Or honestly, in that situation, like when you have a bad day, like just go rip arms in your weight room until you feel huge, like until you feel confident. Like there's no need to overthink anything on those kind of days. Like that's kind of the point I was trying to get with all this was like just go in the weight room and do something that makes you feel really good, makes you like feel like okay, I'm good now. Like you don't overcomplicate it, is basically what I was trying to say. And so he responds, he's like, "What arms do I rip?" And I was like, "Man, like what are we doing? Like it's arms, like biceps, triceps, get huge, right?" And I literally said, "Don't overcomplicate tomorrow's lift. The only goal is to feel like the baddest man alive." And he responds like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, also it just shows like I can't blame this kid. Like, I love this kid. He's a great dude. But it just shows like how athletes have evolved over the years. Like if I texted that back to a coach when he's just like, I think this was on like a Saturday night too. And it's like if I texted that back to a coach, it's like I'm not responding. Like or my coach is not responding. You know what I mean? So I was just like biceps, triceps, shoulders, like as different variations as you can think of. Set a timer for 30 minutes and go. Like giving him some sort of initiative, but like, dude, you got to figure this out, man. And he's like, then he goes, "Can you send me a basic workout? I've been lazy working out and don't even know what to do for those." And so like, I get it, man. Like, there's a lot of athletes out there that they're like that, man. Like they don't like the audacity of, or not the audacity, but like the freedom of like having structure of a workout. That's why they seek out professionals, and that's what you should do, right? Like seek out people that know more than you. But also, I think in a situation like that, that's an instance where that athlete, like he needs to have some freedom and learn a little bit. Like he needs to know, like, all right, man, I suck today. Like, what can I do to like get me back to that feeling of like, okay, next outing I'm going to be good, right? Because like I can't teach that for him, right? Like I can't tell him what to do to get to that. Like it's going to be different based on the individual, right? So then my response was, I'm going to be straight up with you. Part of my philosophy as a coach is to not have athletes be reliant on me. This is one of those times where I can't give you the answers. You need to dig deep and figure this out for yourself. And then I said, if you can't think of a basic arm workout to do, then we got bigger issues than our performance on the mound. And then I said, does that make sense? Just to make sure he gets it. I think that reiteration, it sounds stupid, but it's huge because a lot of kids, especially at the high school level, like they just don't understand that. And so, um, like I think that's a big thing, right? I think that's a big thing for coaches there because it's like the ego in us, like we want to send them the workout and then they feel really great afterwards and then they go out and shove the next day. It's like, coach, I shoved so good, your workout was the reason why. No, the workout was not the reason why. It was because you gained a little bit of a confidence factor and then now you're able to go and shove, right? So what does that mean? Like, what is that doing for me as a coach to just give them a workout? Like, I could maybe give him the answers there and it could work, but then it's like he's not learning anything, right? Like, the whole point of this is so that he can learn, like, how do I respond in this moment, right? And so then, like, I said, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Like, it's going to cripple you in the long run. And then he finally goes, like, got it. Don't be a doofus and just rip. And I'm like, yes, like, that's exactly what we need to do there. And I even gave him some advice, like, look, man, like, go Go sit with your thoughts a little bit, journal kind of like how you felt that outing, journal how you feel right now. Like look back on that, right? Like have these moments that suck, like have these bad moments to then turn into a positive moment, right? Like I think that sounds cheesy, but like when we have bad moments, don't just like try to look past those moments. Like try to kind of learn from those a little bit. Try to, get some value out of it. And I think the big way to do that is just reading and writing and being with your thoughts and stuff like that. And then like go in the weight room and just like destroy yourself, right? Like get big, get huge, like all those things, right? And so both those instances, plus reading this book here and kind of giving like a little bit of some time to thought, I think more coaches kind of need to take that affordance-based kind of philosophy, right? The philosophy where it's like maybe being a little bit more selfless, like not trying to give your athletes all the answers, like giving them some freedom to kind of figure some things out. Like I think a lot of coaches they want to like feel like they can give the athletes the answers, right? Because again, it kind of goes back to that point where it's like if I give the athlete the answer and then they're successful, then it kind of comes back to me like, oh, I did the job. I feel great about myself. But it's like that's not actually helping the athlete, right? Like that's not helping them perform better in the long run. Like they need to be able to figure some things out by themselves. And sure, like be there as a resource always, like for that guy, right? Like I'm not just gonna not respond to him. Like he's asking me for help. I'm gonna kind of give him some help, right? And it's a process, man. Like I'm not gonna say like that situation was like a turning point in his career, and now he's gonna go off on his own and do great things. Like there's still been some instances since then where it's like we kind of got to snap it back into shape. But then hopefully we can get to the point like that college athlete where he is off on his own, right? He's, getting the work in by himself. He's, doing things right in the weight room. But then he does have a question. He can come to me, but still like understand that, like, look, man, this initiative is on you. Like, you got to go do this yourself too. Right. So it's like, it's almost like that action versus just saying something, right? Like, I made a post about that. That's huge, right? Like, we talk about we want to do these things, right? We want to go play Division 1 baseball. We want to be, this big influence figure or whatever. But it's like, what are your actions actually aligning with, right? And so I think just giving athletes a little bit more freedom on that, giving them a little bit more room to fail. I think that's a big thing too. Like let your athletes fail. Let them, feel like I don't know what to do here, coach. Like what am I supposed to do? Give them some time to kind of figure some things out on their own. And then if like you really feel like you need to step in and kind of guide them in the right direction, then do just that. But but yeah, I think that's a big thing for me. And I think I don't know if I would have gotten to that point without, having a little bit of an athletic career in the background. Because I don't think a lot of coaches like you might not pick up on those things right away. Like you might not, if you don't have that experience of like being an athlete yourself or, kind of going through the sport of whatever you're training or any of that, like, or going through some sort of failure in the sport yourself where, you had a bad stretch of games and like, how did you get out of that? And most of the times it's like something that only works for you. Like, I think if you haven't gone through that yourself, it's going to be hard to portray that to an athlete. Right. So, just taking that step back, letting the athletes, be themselves a little bit, letting them kind of grow into a more mature figure. It's only going to help them in the long run. So that was kind of my rant for this episode. Looking forward to having more guests on the podcast here. Still got to get the recording stuff figured out. I know I say that every single podcast, but we're getting there. And yeah, looking forward to keeping sharing stuff out there. Thank you all for listening. And as always, stay juicy.